Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when and where you're watching this Hangout on Air, which is hosted by Lonely Planet. My name is James Kay, and today we're talking about adventure travel in the company of Dave Cornthwaite. Dave is a serial adventurer. He's an author of 3 books. He's been a professional adventurer for how many years, Dave?
9 years now.
9 years. But it wasn't always like that, was it? And I just want to start by taking you back to your 25th birthday. I wondered if you could paint a little bit of a picture of what your life was like at the time and what prompted you to become an adventurer.
For sure. So I woke up on the morning of my 25th birthday staring at my cat, which was on my chest. Her name was Kiwa, if that's important. And I realized that she was about to have a much better day than I was. And it just didn't seem right. I almost felt instantly like I'd largely wasted the first 25 years of my life. I was on paper a successful Western adult, good, well, at least well-paid job. I had a house, a mortgage, a long-term partner, and the pet in question. And I just realized that the only one of those things that I truly loved was the cat. So from that moment on, I started opening up and looking for change, and a couple of months later, it came along in the form of a long skateboard.
And how did you actually kind of stumble on the idea for your first adventure? Because you mentioned it there, the skateboard. Just expand on that and tell us how you honed down on what you were actually going to do.
Well, I think the first case was I opened up to potential change in my life. Everything was very samey for a few years. I'd lived exactly the same day after day after day, and I felt like I wasn't improving myself. I felt like I wasn't doing myself justice as a human, really. I definitely wasn't, taking advantage of that potential and development that we can get from doing new things. So being open to new things was the key. I went snowboarding and loved the feeling of, well, when I wasn't, face down in the snow, I loved the feeling of riding a board. So I wanted to get better at that. But I lived in Swansea in South Wales, a town with no snow, and that's why I got the skateboard. And just 2 weeks of skating around that town, a town I'd lived in for 6 years, just made me realize that the world looked completely different to how I'd previously perceived it, purely because I was seeing it from a different perspective. And the next obvious step for me was just to go on a long journey. I wasn't an endurance athlete. I'd not really done a great deal of that, but I quit my job 2 weeks after stepping onto the board for the first time and decided to, well, skate further than anybody else had ever skated. It was the sanest decision of my life, and still is.
So you've gone to the other side of the world. You are lying there in bed on the eve of this incredible journey you're about to undertake, a 3,600-mile skateboard trip from Perth to Brisbane. What's going through your head just on the night before you set off?
Well, apart from kind of all of the logistics and this crazy mishmash of senses that comes when you go to a place that you've never been to before. It was my first time in Oz. I was just determined. I warmed up by skating from John O'Groats to Land's End, so the length of Britain. So I knew it was in me. I just needed to overcome, I guess, the next 5 months, and of course searing temperatures. The first stage of the journey was across the Nullarbor Plains, so a desert. But all in all, I think if you can skate 10 meters, you can skate 3,500 miles. You just need the time and the will, and I had both of those. I was just hoping nothing went wrong, really.
And you wrote a book about that experience called Board Free. We're going to be giving away 3 copies of that book plus 3 copies of Lonely Planet's 1,000 Ultimate Adventures to any fans who come up with great questions during this Hangout. If you want to do that, just go to the Google Plus event page for this Hangout, or tweet us with the hashtag LP Hangout and tell us what your question is, and we'll get them across to Dave. So it's an incredible feat of physical endurance, as you said, to do that. Did you have any kind of mental or physical wobbles, or any moment that you thought, what the hell am I doing? I'm in the middle of the Nullarbor Plain on a skateboard. This is really a terrible idea.
I never had a sense of this is crazy or this is terrible. I mean, I think it's really important when you set yourself a big goal, especially in the sense of an adventure, that you really, really want to do it, but at the same time you're aware that it's going to be very difficult at times. knowing that you want to get to that goal at the end is what takes you through the hardest periods of that venture, whether they're mental or physical. That said, I definitely had some wobbles. Certainly, about 1,500 miles before the end of the trip, I was just coming up to the East Coast and heading towards Sydney, which was the world record mark. And then I still had another 1,000 kilometers on top. I was super tired. The blisters were coming. But ultimately, I just kind of, if ever I feel like I'm on the verge of giving up, then I just go to sleep. And everything seems better when you wake up.
Okay, that sounds like a very sound strategy. We've got a question here from one of our fans, Teresa, and she's saying, is there a day on any of your adventures, you've done so many, where you just kind of looked yourself in the mirror and thought, I'm actually going to go mad if I continue doing this?
No, if anything, it's the opposite. I think the more you live a life of adventure, the more adventures and expeditions you go on, as long as each one is tangibly different in some senses, whether it's the theme, it might be the geography, it might be that simple, but knowing that you're only on that adventure because you want to be, and rather than because it's your profession, you have to do expeditions to have more stories, etc. I'll only ever do something if I really want to do it from the outset, from the gut idea. So no, I think slowly your values get adapted to the choices you make, and I still love doing this. If I ever don't, then I'll make a big change again.
Mm-hmm. You've travelled an unbelievable 16,000 miles on all these different forms of transport so far. It's a very hard question, but are any of those miles etched the most vividly in your memory? And if so, why is that the one that you remember most clearly?
Gosh, it's such a difficult question in many ways because there's been so many. In fact, this year I've kind of added a couple of thousand more onto that 16,000 miler, and I think the first and last miles of each journey will always stand out because you begin, you're kind of stepping over that line out of your comfort zone once more. You've done all the prep, but you know that so much is going to happen that you have no idea of and usually no control of. So the first miles are always key. And I think the first mile of the first big journey I ever did, skating out of John O'Groats, knowing I had to make it to Land's End, and if I didn't make it to Land's End, the world record, the Crossing Australia journey, was off the cards. I think that definitely stands out, mainly because by the end of the first mile I was absolutely knackered.
What kind of reaction did you get from people as you kind of zip by on your skateboard in John O'Groats?
I didn't get any reaction from anybody because John O'Groats was empty. Entirely empty. There was nobody there. But slowly, as I passed through cities, villages and towns, obviously it was quite an odd thing for someone to be traveling by skateboard, and I've taken that love of having an icebreaker, of traveling in a fairly unique way, into all of my other adventures. And I love the physical and mental challenges that come with self-propelled travel, but also that opening up of being able to talk to people, just turning strangers into friends.
Mm. And there has been obviously this incredible range of different forms of non-motorized transport you've tried. Do you have a favourite, and equally, do you have a least favourite that you've tried so far?
I think it would be pretty harsh to say to pick out a least favourite, but I think one journey that really stands out, definitely formatively, was stand-up paddleboarding the length of the Mississippi. I was going for the best part of 3 months. Everything that I needed to live, rest, work and play and travel was all strapped to the deck of this board in dry bags, and it was all I needed. It really consolidated everything I'd done before that, and I guess led me into a more stable path of sustainable adventure after that.
One of our fans has noted, obviously been paying attention, they noted that you've never travelled by camel. Is there some reason behind this?
Well, there's a lot of ways that I haven't travelled yet, so that's definitely a main one. I probably travelled maybe 30 miles by camel visiting the Moroccan Sahara a few years ago, and I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to commit to doing 1,000 miles by camel just yet. It was kind of lumpy.
Okay. Are there any other kind of forms of transport that do you have like a list of things that you'd like to try, or something that you're desperate to have a go at?
Definitely nothing I'm desperate to have a go at. I think I try not to plan too far ahead, so ideas for these expeditions come up kind of when I've had a rest after the previous one, I'm ready to, energy-wise and creatively to come up with a new expedition. I do on my website, davecornthwaite.com, have a list of potential ways to travel on the expeditions page that can fit into my Expedition 1000 project, which, for people who don't know, it's an overarching umbrella for all of my long distance journeys. The idea is to do 25 different trips of 1,000 miles or more, and each one uses a different form of non-motorized transport. So I've completed 10 of those and still 15 to go, maybe or maybe not, including camel.
What's the most obscure place that you've ended up?
Gosh, another good question. Earlier this year, I was traveling by Wike, which is an amazing tricycle, but with a sail, almost like a windsurf sail. And myself and two friends, Jamie and Ned, we traveled from Santiago in Chile north through the Atacama Desert, which is the driest place on the planet. In some parts of the desert, it hasn't rained there for decades and decades. So that was a really raw, different landscape to anywhere I've been. And I suppose the other thing that stands out is the Nullarbor Plain in Western South Australia. There's a certain part of the Nullarbor where there's no trees whatsoever. It's definitely not a place where you'd initially recommend a red-headed, translucent-skinned ginger man to go skateboarding for a long time.
I hope you took a hat. We have a kind of related question, or we're talking about places which are really off the beaten track. From one of our fans, See Something. They're asking, really, when you're coming up with these ideas, you're planning your trips, do you think about adventure first and the possibilities for that, or do you also think about, what do you think about safety?
I rarely think about safety. I think things are always more scary from a distance. So in the planning phase of a journey, of course, you touch on the things that could potentially stop the expedition or cause you individual harm or harm to one of your teammates, should it be a team trip. And I've kind of got to the stage now where, I'll do the legwork and make sure that I know how to deal with something if I face a potential danger. But on the whole, I just go for it, and I know that once you're there facing up to whether it's an alligator on the Mississippi River or big road trains in Australia, or indeed snakes or spiders or anything else that tends to put people off doing these things, then once you're facing them, they don't really seem that scary because it's all just part of the experience.
Yeah. On that note, do you have any phobias? Any kind of animals or anything else that really kind of sends a shiver down your spine that has caused a few issues during these adventures?
Less and less, actually. I think there's not too much that scares me anymore, apart from something freak happening, and I don't get to come home, and I'm more scared for my partner and my family than anything. Not that is ever really forefront in my mind, to be honest with you. I think everything that I do is about confronting some kind of fear or another, and I kind of love just going for it and just ticking that off the list now.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting question relating to what you've just said. It's come in on Twitter for us, asking, is there anyone important in your life who tells you, look, Dave, just get a stable job, just stay in one place, please, stop going on any of these adventures and calm down? Is there any voices like that in your life that are really kind of offering a different point of view?
Not anymore. Definitely at the beginning, a few years ago when I did break away from a well-paid job and climbing a kind of seemingly normal life, it was strange for my friendship group and definitely my family at the time. But as time's gone on, I've made a fairly successful job of turning these adventures into at least a meager income, enough to get by, and it's me. I'm life, my leisure time, and my work, they're just all intertwined. Without doing this, I literally couldn't deal with having a stable job. I think knowing when my next paycheck is coming in, it would take away all the freedom that I realize life offers when you're not stuck in one place.
I think that there's something there that people are going to be really interested in is the practicalities of being a professional adventurer, traveling constantly, but the actual, how do you go about making a living? How do you deal with other challenges in your life? How do you maintain that kind of lifestyle without losing touch with everyone?
Gosh, it's a question I could answer, but I think just to really break it down, the one way to make a living out of your passion, usually that means you're not going to get a great deal of money early on. which is, pretty much the case with anything. So I think really being able to live simply, downsize your outgoings, and be able to live on barely anything. And for me, I think adventure is a great way to learn how to do that, because you can't take much on your back if you're self-propelling yourself a long distance, and you realize that you're kind of just as happy waking up in a tent with pretty much no material possessions, as well, certainly in my case, as I was when I was earning a lot of money and I had a man cave and lots of DVDs and stuff. So I think there are that people definitely don't see, from the outside. I think a lot of people would like my life. I get to travel a lot. I challenge myself a lot. I have some great stories and achievements to look back on. But there's a lot of laptop time. I think I work harder now than I ever did when I had a proper job. But I think the difference is I love every aspect of what I do. I'm completely in control of my time, and it doesn't ever really. My income comes from public speaking, a few book sales, and that just about does it. I don't really have any big financial sponsors. I can just get my gear for free now because I've proven that I can, look after people who support me.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a bucket list of destinations, or does it not really work that way?
No, I don't. I think every time I'm on this project, and cursed in a good way, I should add, I have 15 of these 1,000-mile plus journeys to go, and I always start with the mode of transport. It might be someone just sending me an email and saying, have you seen this? And it just might be the right time, and I think, man, I've got to do this. It might be, like in the case of Christmas a couple of years ago, my parents got me some swimming goggles, and instantly I started thinking about swimming 1,000 miles, and did so in 2012. So it's not really a geographical location that I then fit everything else around. It's how to travel, and then it becomes, okay, where's suitable for this?
Have you ever kind of ended up somewhere, well, I suppose the answer would be lots of places, but which places really, really overturned your expectations and surprised you?
I think the USA, when I went there for the first time in 2011, it was to cycle a tandem bike with my friend Seb from Vancouver to Vegas, and I got a little taste of the beauties of the United States when I was there. Up until then, obviously George Bush was president, and I think almost every American gets tarnished with the brush of their president, if you like. And I just thought, gosh, how can that nation get this guy to take charge of them? So I definitely had some stereotypical persuasions before I went, but that journey, and then I've done a few. I rode a four-wheel bicycle from Memphis to Miami. I went down the Mississippi and the Missouri, and my view of America and Americans has changed considerably. It's one of my favorite places to go. I've got so many friends there now, and I almost understand why a lot of Americans don't have passports, because it is the most beautiful place on the planet. It's so varied from coast to coast, mountains, amazing rivers. It's I could see myself settling in America above pretty much anywhere in many ways.
Yeah, it's an incredible country. What would you say your 5 golden rules for all travel?
5 golden rules. I think 1, keep it simple. The second one would be do it for yourself. Always, try and ignore expectations and what you think you should be doing. Don't want to be there, then there's just absolutely no point doing it. Thirdly, gosh, this is quite a difficult question, I think. Thirdly, talk to people. Always have people involved. I think that's the most important thing for any journey for me. Even if I'm by myself, people are always at the forefront of my mind, but learning from others is, I think that's where we can get our biggest lessons. Travel down a river. If I'm ever feeling low, if I ever feel like I need a change or a period of reflection, I just go and travel a river. And I think finally, and it's not just travel related, it's everywhere. Just look at things that seem familiar to you and see if there's a slightly different way you can use them or treat them. And I think that's a real key to etching the most out of life.
Mm-hmm. I guess this is a companion question to that. Do you this is obviously a big concern to a lot of our travelers. the ultimate packing tips. What goes into your what stuff can you not live without, even though you're traveling in a very lightweight way?
So everything lives in a dry bag for me. It's going to be very likely that I'm going to end up in or near a river or the ocean or a lake at some point pretty soon. I actually don't have a home, so this is kind of an easy question because everything that I travel with, that's my life now. I've really downsized since I sold my house a few years ago and went skateboarding. I always travel with an iPhone. It's just my mobile office. I film with it. I take photos with it. I do all of my social media. I edit my films on my iPhone. That's just a real all-in-one tool for me. I always pack my contact lenses because without them, I've got really bad eyesight, and I think my journeys would be very different if I didn't have them. I always carry a hammock with me. And I love hammocking all over the world. I usually spend probably 100 nights in a hammock each year. And a buff. I actually don't have one to hand, but a buff is kind of a tubular piece of material. It's great for a hat. I use it as a neck warmer, keep insects off. Sometimes it makes a really good sling. I've used that for a sling a couple of times. I use it to suspend my hammock off a tree. Really handy stuff.
Have you just on the buff? Have you suffered many injuries on the road?
Not really. I've been really lucky. I've had a few strains. Luckily, no broken bones during my adventures. I was hit by a car at 80 miles an hour just 4 hours into starting my bike car journey from Memphis to Miami, and somehow walked away from that without a bruise. I think the biggest injury I've had came last year when I was riding an elliptigo across Europe, and randomly I was just storing it for 2 days of rest in Zurich, and I slipped down some stairs and ruptured the lower disc in my spine. So
Wow.
that's the biggest injury by far.
Do you have any travel heroes or people whose adventures you really admire and I guess got you thinking about starting this new way of life all that time ago?
I definitely wasn't led into this lifestyle by looking at other people and thinking I wish I could have that. It was more that I was just less than inspired by myself, and I felt like I wanted to inspire myself before I could be a good role model for the people around me, which I think is something healthy that we can all aspire to. Now, I don't have any heroes per se. I just want to constantly develop myself, but the people I really admire are kind of in my friendship group now, my peer group. Folks, I know how hard it is to make a living out of something you're passionate, especially if it's adventure. There's not many people who've managed to do it, and I really admire my friends Al Humphreys, Sean Conway. He's about to run the length of Britain in a couple of weeks. My friend Sarah Ooten, she's out traveling around the world under her own steam. My partner Emily, she's sailing the Northwest Passage right now. Just folks who've really got past that noise of everybody around them saying don't do this, this is kind of socially dangerous, you need to get a good stable job and stay in the same place, but they've ignored that and they've gone and really made something of themselves. That's admirable.
Yeah. I've got one more question, then we've got quite a few questions coming in from our fans, but my last one was, what key advice would you give to someone who as a would-be traveller, they feel, as you once did, that they're kind of sleepwalking through their life? What's the first step they should take?
I think there's a few potential first steps, but the first thing is just believe in yourself. Even if you don't feel like there's anything to grab hold of, everybody's got a talent or an ability that they can definitely take and transform their lives with. And I think just being able to take that first step, which almost always seems like a big risk, mainly because people around you are telling you not to do it, just trust yourself, trust your gut instinct, and go for it. I guess, for me, I want to get to the last day of my life and look back and think, I used my time as well as I possibly could. I couldn't have done anything else with my life. And right now here, I'm in a position, we all are, to decide how we kind of reflect on our personal legacy. The only thing we're in control of is how to use our time. So using that really well is the absolute key. And I guess a more practical tip to do that is just write a bucket list. If you're ever in a rut, it's a brilliant way to start off. You know, it could be a yes list or a life list, whatever you call it, but just write at least 50 things that you want to do with your life. They might be traveling somewhere, they might be achieving a certain goal, but keep money out of it, try and keep career out of it. Just a list of things that make you passionate and excited. Start ticking them off, and the rest looks after itself.
Okay, so we got a related question from Bill, who's asking, would you ever kind of consider taking someone along with you who really hasn't had much of a chance to have an adventure, but kind of, you know, mentor them in a way, take them along with you, get them started in the adventuring lifestyle? Would you ever consider doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've taken a couple of teams of people who haven't really done adventures before, and they've acted as a support team for me on my own expedition, but of course have their own adventure too. And also I co-mission lead a project called Exploring Mindset, which is all about taking folks who are ready to make a transformation in their lives and basically start seeking a new direction for themselves. And, you know, usually that's based on purpose and ultimately being able to give back. And the next one of that, it's always on a yacht, a 72-foot yacht. So it's a brilliant thinking space. You're not bothered by all of those pressures of land. The next one is it's in December in the Caribbean, no less. So yeah, wow. I do that 3 times a year. It's called Exploring Mindset. You can find it on my website.
I might be volunteering for that myself.
Come along.
What adventure destination would you recommend to someone who is on the first trip? Is there anywhere that you would say that is a brilliant place to go?
I think this completely depends on the individual. But if somebody is complete blank slate, but no, they want to go and do a big adventure that will ultimately change them and give them an amazing experience, go and paddle the Mississippi River. I'm not joking. Go up to the top in Minnesota, start in Lake Itasca, and for 3 months you will meet the most incredible people. Yes, you'll be challenged, but you'll learn so much about yourself. That river is probably the biggest teacher of my life. Every single stage of it prepared me for the next stage, which just was bigger, you know, more water, more hurdles, more boats, ultimately more challenges. But gosh, yeah, if you have a completely blank slate, go paddle the Mississippi. There's nothing like it.
Wow. Okay, I've got a question here from Jessie, who is asking, do you ever listen to music while you're on your adventures? And if so, what's your favourite genre? She is a fan of disco funk or hard rock. What about you?
Jessie, good question. Yeah, I do listen to music.
Could be he or she, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Apologies. So, Jessie, whoever you are out there, yeah, I love listening to music. I try not to too much when I'm on the road, especially if you know, there's a lot of vehicles going along. I just want to keep all my senses about me, but especially when I'm on water, I'll definitely have an iPod in. And you know, I don't think I could restrict myself to one genre. I've got everything from Counting Crows to, wait for it, Bon Jovi on there. Unapologetically Bon Jovi.
Okay. So when you finish one of your adventures, how long does it take before you've got through the planning process on the next one and you're taking off again? What's the turnaround time?
It really varies. I think I read just earlier today, there's been a few posts going around about this post-expedition depression or post-expedition syndrome, which it's not quite as ruthless as it sounds. It's just this natural kind of lull or rut feeling when you've come off an expedition. You've been working really hard for a long time physically, you've been aiming for a goal, and suddenly you achieve it, or maybe you don't, and then there's naturally just kind of a bit of a trough after that. So the longer the expedition, usually the longer the trough afterwards. There's a few different ways to get past it. For me now, I try not to come home straight after an expedition. I think flying back to a familiar place is almost as depressing as it can get after, you know, several months or weeks of colour and challenge. For me, I think, you know, a good 2 months for every 1 month of travelling, a minimum of 2 months of downtime is really important. But after skateboarding for 5 months, it probably took me 8 months to recover. After swimming, probably the same period. And I'm in one of those kind of restive periods now, just coming off the end of it. It's quite a nice feeling.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a question here from Hayley, who likes to think of herself as a soft adventurer. She tries to stay away from places where there's actual kind of life-threatening scenarios unfolding, which is very sensible. Her question is there anything that you'd never do again, even if someone offered you £1 million?
Gosh, really good question, Hayley. I think in many ways, I'm a soft adventurer too. I don't like the idea of going off on an expedition and thinking, gosh, I might die on this. We might die just walking down the streets of London or wherever we live. That goes without saying. But I don't think I'm interested in going off to mountains and stuff like that. What would I never do again? I think I did do an adventure a couple of years ago where it was a sponsored journey by a company, and because of that, every single step of the way I had to kind of get to an event or really indulge a lot of my energies in stuff that I don't really want to do. And I think one of my main lessons is never ever do anything for the money, only do it for myself. So yeah, there's probably quite a few things that I'd turn down £1 million for. Ultimately, I just want to be able to be free and make my own decisions on a trip, and I don't think I'd ever do a big sponsored journey again.
Mm-hmm. I've got a question from David here, who is just saying that he loves being on foot. He loves being out in the environment. He likes hiking. That's the way he really enjoys experiencing travel. Have you already done, or are you going to do a long distance hike as one of your 25,000 mile adventures?
It's a really good question, and the answer is yes, definitely. I think I'm a huge advocate of traveling slowly, and obviously all of these trips that I do, they're non-motorized. I don't want to feel like I'm enclosed in a metal vehicle, missing out on sounds, sights, feelings, smells, and also that pure enjoyment of just reaching the next town and feeling like you've earned it. You just don't get that in a car. So I think walking, of course, is one of the most slow ways to travel that you can think of. So I think I'm definitely going to do a big hike. I may even do a big run at some point. I think they'd be, although they're both on foot, they'd be very, very different trips. I'm not going to commit to the run just yet, though.
Do you have any destinations in mind for any of those?
Yeah, I think the hike, the length of New Zealand, I think that would definitely top out over 1,000 miles, and it's something my partner Emily and I have talked about doing for a while. It might not be this or next year, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the length of that lovely double island.
Wow. Okay. All right. I've got a couple more questions, and I'm going to wrap it up. Question from Nathaniel here. He's just finished a trip with a trikey. A trikey? I'm not familiar with that. 248 miles, 15,000 feet of climbing in 5 days. What would you recommend for him to do next? Have a rest, I would say.
So actually, I can answer your confusion about trikey there. The last expedition that I did was on a trike built by the company Ice from Falmouth. When I got to the end, they so kindly just gave me the trike, but I said, look, I'm not going to use it this summer, so let's get other people off doing adventures on it. And Nathaniel is one of those guys. I called it trikey because I'm very inventive. So Nathaniel, what should you do next? I think you should do something different. I'm not going to recommend that you go paddle the Mississippi because I just start sounding like a broken record, but I think you should start looking at doing a minimum of 1,000 miles. I'm setting you this challenge right now, Nathaniel, and find a continent that you can cross any way you like, but as long as it's without a motor.
Okay, I've just got one last question, and we're going to go rewind right to the beginning of our chat. You spoke about your cat, and Lindsay would love to know, would you ever consider taking your cat on one of your epic adventures?
This was a long, hard consideration I had right back when all of this started, and I just thought, as lovely as it would be, I loved Kiwa, but it would have been quite unsettling for her, and I don't want to put a cat on a lead, and I just end up losing her. So I gave her to my best friend, and Kiwa is now happily living, a different life, still with a big smile on her face, and undoubtedly posing those endless deep life questions every single morning when she's asking for food.
Okay. Dave, that's been absolutely brilliant. I'm sure that you'll have inspired a lot of people with what we've been talking about. Where can they go to find out more information about you and about the expeditions that you've done already?
So I have a website, davecornthwaite.com, which I think is at the bottom of the screen right here. I'm really active through Facebook and Twitter as well, and my next journey starts in 2 weeks. I'm going to paddle the length of the Swedish coastline on a Hobie pedal kayak, which I'm really excited about. So follow along on facebook.com/expedition1000, and on Instagram and Twitter, my handle is @DaveCorn.
Okay, great. And to anybody out there who wants even more ideas for adventure travel, you can also go to lonelyplanet.com/adventure-travel. There's absolutely loads of stuff on there for you to dig into. It just leaves me to say thanks very much, Dave. We really appreciate you taking time out to talk to us, and have a great time in next adventure. Let us know about it.
It's been my pleasure. Say yes more, everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.